Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's Wednesday, midweek. We got a show for you guys today. So we've got some breaking news that happened before the show went live. We're going to talk about Breonna Taylor. There has been an indictment, so we're going to talk about that. Please give us one news story. Not happening, unfortunately. Yeah. So we're going to, I guess I kind of gave it away, but we're going to go through that story first. We're going to talk about Breonna Taylor. We're going to talk about, Rand Paul versus Dr. Fauci. We've got a whistleblower, talking about the coronavirus task force. We have Trump supporters, doing a ridiculous rally. And then, the Pentagon took a lot of your tax money and, gave it to defense contractors. So great news today. So we'll dive into it. Before we do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Help us out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please consider giving to our fundraiser so that we can, do more streaming. I should try to stream on Twitch yesterday. It wrecked my recordings. So I do not have the CPU for that, turns out. So I need an upgrade real bad if I want to stream on all the different platforms that I want to stream on this show. All right, that said, let's get into it. Let's start out with Breonna Taylor. We have an indictment in the case of Breonna Taylor, who was murdered by police officers in her apartment. A Jefferson County grand jury has indicted one of the three officers involved in the March 13th fatal shooting of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor. So now this was announced earlier today. Former Detective Brett Hankinson was indicted on 3 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment. Wanton endangerment. So the other officers were not indicted. That's Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly and Detective Miles Cosgrove. So what is wanton endangerment? It is a Class D felony, and it carries a penalty of 1 to 5 years in prison, which this officer will likely not see. Basically what it is they are indicting this officer for, quote, wantonly shooting a gun into 3 apartments. Not really mentioning that he also wantonly shot a gun 5 times into Breonna Taylor, killing her. I mean, this is really, oh boy. So the grand jury did not find that Hankinson wantonly fired into Taylor's apartment the night that she died, even though officers had absolutely fired into the apartment. All right, so here's what happened. Around 1 a.m., police did a no-knock warrant on Breonna's apartment. They were looking for drugs. They were looking for cash. They found neither. And so police said they claimed that they announced themselves after knocking on the door. That, of course, is absolutely disputed by Kenneth Walker, who was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. And so Walker, his account, he said, look, we're sleeping in the apartment. Breonna's asleep. We hear these knocking on the door. I ask, who is it? No answer. I'm worried that I'm getting robbed or, we're getting a break-in, so I get my gun. These plainclothes, what were revealed later to be police officers, we had no idea of knowing, bust into the apartment. Walker fires. The officers fire back, and they spray 3 apartments with bullets, 5 of them into Breonna Taylor when she died. And then she died. So that's it. There was one single shot from Walker that hit Mattingly in the thigh. And that was it. Mattingly, Cosgrove, and Hankinson fired more than 24 rounds in response, damaging 3 apartments. And, of course, that's where the wanton firing of a gun charge comes into play. Walker, however, was charged with attempted murder of a police officer and assault before the charges were dropped. Mattingly, Cosgrove have been on administrative reassignment. Hankinson was, of course, fired. The officers have not spoken publicly until Tuesday, when Mattingly sent a 2 a.m. email to more than 1,000 colleagues saying that they had done the, quote, legal, moral, and ethical thing that night. Are you really sure? I mean, you grabbed a no-knock warrant and then murdered someone in their own apartment. I mean, legality aside, was it really the moral and ethical thing to do to murder someone who had not done anything? I mean, this is insanity. They're not even, notice, there's no charge about the death of Taylor. None at all. She did nothing. This is an unconscionable decision. And of course, yesterday, when I had received the news, I looked it up on social media when it broke that, hey, we're doing some lockdowns and, we're boarding up. We're preparing the city for the announcement of the indictments of what's going to happen in the Breonna Taylor case. When I heard that, I said, oh, God, this cannot be good. This is not going to end up well. This decision is going to be a bad decision. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. This decision is it's just a terrible decision. It's just a terrible decision. And yes, lying to the judge to get a warrant, not okay. It's not okay, but apparently in Louisiana, absolutely fine. Again, there was no reason to search that apartment whatsoever. They already had the person in custody. I mean, it's just amazing. But again, once the people, there's actually a crowd of protesters that was outside the courthouse that were waiting for this announcement. And let's just say the disappointment was palpable when they had heard. In fact, I got video of that. Let's take a look.
15,000 full cash bond for the defendant, Breonna. And a joint commission and assign bond in the amount of $15,000 full cash and issue a warrant. That concludes the business of the grand jury sitting for Jefferson County in September 2020. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be excused.
That's it. That's it. Where's the justice? Where's the justice? Again, this is just an indictment. There's no, there's no guarantee that this person, Hankinson, is even going to get punished as a result of this. Or, and if he does walk, what's to prevent another, police department from hiring him? I mean, there's no justice here. And even more importantly, this seems to serve as more proof, that black bodies are not valued in this country. The walls of this apartment complex got more justice than Breonna Taylor did today. And that is incredibly sad. I guess police can just bust into an apartment and shoot, black people dead. There was that other case where, there's a quote-unquote confused police officer going into an apartment belonging to a black man and shooting him dead. Well, I thought it was mine. I mean, I guess that can already happen in this country. And again, they didn't even charge anyone for Breonna's death. What was it? What was it, an accident? They don't even address it. They didn't even address it. But the officer, hey, you wantonly shot a gun. How dare you? You hurt some property. You hurt that wall. You could have hurt a white neighbor with that wantonly discharging a firearm. Can't do that. I mean, this is absolutely disgusting. It's a complete miscarriage of justice. And look, maybe it's a good thing that Louisville prepared for this. They knew it was going to happen. The protests are coming. I hope they remain peaceful. I encourage peaceful protest, but if it doesn't happen, don't be surprised, because this is a gigantic slap in the face. It's amazing. All right, let's move on. Let's go to more injustice in this country. It's coronavirus. Things got a little bit heated between Dr. Fauci and Senator Rand Paul during a coronavirus hearing on Wednesday. Let's take a look.
Dr. Fauci, today you said you are not for economic lockdown, yet your mitigation recommendations from dating to baseball to restaurants to movie theaters have led to this economic lockdown. Do you have any second thoughts about your mitigation recommendations, considering the evidence that despite all of the things we've done in the U.S., our death rate is essentially worse than Sweden, equivalent to the less developed world that is unable to do any of the things that you've been promoting? Do you have any second thoughts? Are you willing to look at the data that countries that did very little actually have a lower death rate than the United States?
All right, so that was Rand Paul. Now, about 3 minutes before that, he spent a lot of time doing a gish gallop, basically. So he threw out a bunch of information, some of which was not cited. For example, he claimed that without lockdowns, the same number of people would have died. There's no evidence to back that up. He also threw in loaded language, like, for example, calling efforts to fight the pandemic as quote-unquote authoritarian. He also kept using Sweden as an example while downplaying Japan and South Korea. He did address it, but again, downplayed those countries and their efforts to fight the coronavirus. Japan, by the way, look, Japan and South Korea, generally the population seems to be a bit more community-oriented as far as like caring about the nation and their fellow citizens. And so they tend to put that over their personal stuff, like quote-unquote personal freedom. They're also used to wearing masks. You see a lot of mask wearing in those countries. And so as a result, they didn't necessarily, at least in Japan, require the government to put out special rules, right? Strict rules. In the case of Japan, they actually didn't have the authority. But in South Korea, they did put in some strict rules. But Rand Paul uses the example of Sweden because what his overall goal is to open up the country without reducing the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. So now, look, I want to reopen the economy, of course, but as most of us do. But I'm willing to wait until it's safe enough to do so. And that's ultimately what all of us want. We want to have a better handle on the virus so that we can go out and we can go out safely without having to worry about transmitting the virus to people like our grandmothers, grandfathers, relatives with, with like immunocompromised systems, and all that, right? So we just want to do that, and we can achieve that by wearing masks, social distancing, contact tracing, and of course, vaccination once a safe and effective vaccine is available. Rand Paul, however, Rand Paul's lazy. So the reason I say that is because Rand Paul and the rest of the Republicans don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to do any of that. What they want to do is just take the easy way out and say, I don't know, let's just all go back to normal and let herd immunity take care of it, right? So that means, of course, no lockdowns. We're just going to allow everyone to be infected. And that'll work out. For whom? I mean, you do even the most simple math, and you come out with the potential of millions of people dying in this country. Remember, the death rate of just 1%, right? With the death rate of 1%, over 3 million Americans would die if everyone in this country were infected. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen, but herd immunity basically says that if you reach a certain threshold, for example, let's say 70% of the population has the antibodies, then that means that essentially the virus has a very hard time of spreading, right? Because, they're not as infectious. The body fights it off. You've got the antibodies and all that stuff. And you're immune essentially to it, to being reinfected, and then you won't be able to spread it, and the virus kind of dies off. So now, even that, right, you would see with 70%, you would still see, to get to that point, around 2 million people dying. Remember, out of the 7 million people known to be infected in the country, you've got over 200,000 people that have died. You do the math on that, and death rate is nearly 3%. You expand that out to the entire population, or even most of the population, then you would have at a 2.86% death rate, which we currently have now, that's nearly 8 million people. So that, no matter what you do and what factors that you put in, just by the pure numbers, you're going to see at least a few million people dead. And that's not to mention, of course, long-term damage to people who've gotten the virus, people that are, the long haulers, for example. And there is also conflicting evidence whether or not people stay immune for long enough for this to happen. And so, look, this virus, I don't think that you can just really herd immunity away without having a massive, massive death toll. And so, nonetheless, Dr. Fauci, he's going to talk about this, and he's basically going to call bullshit on Rand Paul using Sweden as an example because, well, just watch.
Senator, I'd be happy at a different time to sit down and go over detail. You've said a lot of different things. You've compared us to Sweden, and there are a lot of differences. And you said, well, there are a lot of differences between Sweden, but compare Sweden's death rate to other comparable Scandinavian countries. It's worse. So I don't think it's appropriate to compare Sweden with us. I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean, essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
All right. So, look, basically, let's talk about Sweden, right? So that's the discussion that Rand Paul wants to have. All right. Well, Rand Paul said, well, the government, look, we didn't need to do this lockdown. The government in Sweden didn't do this lockdown. So, okay. But as a result, more people in Sweden died comparative to the other countries, okay, who had more stricter lockdowns. So already the data contradicts what Rand Paul was, the point that Rand Paul was trying to make is that, well, the people that the countries that locked down, we've got the same death rate. And then, of course, they compare it to America. But see, again, that's the problem. They're not comparable. And so there's a factor here that really undercuts Rand Paul's argument. See, in Sweden, and this doesn't get mentioned a lot of people actually voluntarily isolated. They did work from home when possible. Over 80% of Swedes reported doing and adhering to social distancing measures. Although, of course, there have been large gatherings of tourists and generally younger men who didn't seem to follow the guidelines as much, and that's, of course, why you seen a lot of this stuff pop up. So 80%. I do not think that it would be that high in America. And again, in Sweden, they had a gigantic spike, and then they had a fall off, right? So the question is, well, Republicans, conservatives will look at that and be like, well, see, it worked. I mean, yeah, you had the gigantic spike, over half of which happened in nursing homes and things like that. But look, they're doing pretty good. They must have herd immunity, right? Well, right now, it's basically estimated that around 6% of the population of Sweden, and this was in July, these are July's numbers, were known to have the antibodies. Now, again, we don't know necessarily how long those antibodies last, how long that people are actually immune, or if they can get reinfected. There's still a lot that we don't know about the virus. But there are experts in Sweden that say, well, look, that actually might be higher, to be fair. And this is according to the Swedish Public Health Agency. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that Sweden did things that we in America, I don't think we're going to do. Widespread testing, for example, contact tracing, and isolation. And again, they still had, as a result of lax measures, a higher death rate than the countries that had more strict measures and weren't as voluntary. And so now the Republican plan, by the way, and this is really the difference, the Republican plan doesn't involve widespread testing, contact tracing, or anything like that. It just means open everything up and act like everything is normal. Well, wait a minute. That's not what Sweden did. We would actually do even worse than that if we were to enact a Republican plan. And again, Donald Trump doesn't want widespread testing. He's to slow the testing down. People like Rand Paul are against contact tracing because government overreach, and many Republicans aren't interested at all in voluntarily socially distancing or wearing their masks. And so the Swedish approach, not going to work here because people are not going to voluntarily do that. It's going to end up killing a great many more people per capita because people would, without a mandate, just choose not to participate. We wouldn't even see the height. I would say probably around 60% of people in America would do the voluntary actions, whereas because you've already seen it in a lot of areas, a lot of people not doing any of the stuff, social distancing or wearing masks or anything like that. And so there's some problems with that. It would be, I think, an absolute disaster. However, Rand Paul, he is not done with this. He's going to continue to try to make the argument against doing any of these measures, and he's going to try to bring up New York as an example. Take a look.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator, and you've done that repetitively in the past. They got hit very badly. They've made some mistakes. Right now, if you look at what's going on right now, the things that are going on in New York to get their test positivity 1% or less is because they are looking at the guidelines that we have put together from the task force of the 4 or 5 things of masks, social distancing, outdoors more than indoors, avoiding crowds, and washing hands.
Or they've developed enough community immunity that they're no longer having the pandemic because they have enough immunity in New York City to actually stop.
I challenge that, Senator, because I want to, please, sir, I would like to be able to do this because this happens with Senator Rand all the time. You were not listening to what the director of the CDC said, that in New York it's about 22%. If you believe 22% is herd immunity, I believe you're alone in that.
22%. So that would be a rather low threshold for herd immunity. But here's the thing. Do you think that Rand Paul cares about that? Do you think he even knows about that? I know, but you don't understand, Rand Paul's not a doctor, he's an optometrist. He also is going up against Dr. Fauci, who is an immunologist and virologist. And so he actually knows a bit more. So just because, well, I mean, they both are doctors. Oh, okay, but that's saying that, like a doctor, for example, a general practitioner is skilled enough to do brain surgery. That's not at all true. Or even a cardiac surgeon would do great at brain surgery. No, they're not the same thing. They're specializations. And so Dr. Fauci's specialization is viruses. And so he kind of knows what he's doing. And I know I've got some people talking about how, oh, it's just for the money-sucking vaccines. It's actually really, really cheap to create vaccines, and most of them are free. Now, look, I have done stories about how there are private corporations that want to charge an arm and a leg for a vaccine. And so that's, if you want to make that point, that corporate greed is getting in the way of people being vaccinated, that's fair. But and that's actually, going to be a good point. And I've made that point before. But how exactly would Fauci himself benefit from corporations? Is he a CEO? Is he a shareholder? It doesn't seem like there seems to be a link there. Really strange. But look, here's the thing. As I said, Sweden did what they did, and there were a lot of people that ended up paying the price. Now, we're not sure what the long-term impacts would be because we don't know enough about the virus. It may turn out that maybe it did work. Maybe there is a lower threshold. But at the same time, we're not exactly Sweden. In America, we're different. We have a different culture. We have an incredibly individualistic culture. And I don't think Americans, it's not that I think that we're too stupid to do things right. No, that's stupidity doesn't have anything to do with it. I think there's selfishness and stubbornness that gets in the way. So people don't want to mask up voluntarily. They don't want to socially distance. They don't want to avoid large gatherings or work from home from possible. And there are millions of people who won't do that. And we couldn't even achieve a herd immunity, I think, with so many of those people who are so individualistic that they refuse to do any of the measures that Swedes voluntarily have done in their country to slow the pandemic. And not only that, but Japanese have also voluntarily done these measures to try to slow and stop the pandemic. I don't think Americans will do that. I just don't think we're going to do that. And so with a population as large as America, we're going to potentially see millions of people. And all for what? So that people can eat it at Applebee's again inside? I don't really think that's a good trade-off. I don't think it's worth it. There's a lot of economic devastation, and that really does concern me. I am very, very worried about that. But at the same time, again, because millions of people are struggling, right? At the same time, why are we making a false choice out of, well, we're just going to have to sacrifice millions of people to COVID so that millions others can go and actually be able to eat it in Applebee's again and work and all that stuff. That's a false choice. There are measures that we can take to slow the virus so that we can actually begin to reopen the economy and do it in a way that protects the most vulnerable. And there are ways that the government can, support the American people, which they have not. They have supported corporations. They have supported the wealthy. They've supported the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, all over the American people, making it really, really difficult for people to do the right thing. They even killed a plan by the post office to hand out free masks. And the president has not been a leader on saying that we should socially distance or mask up because of purely political reasons. And so this is a problem, okay? Look, it's about personal responsibility. And Republicans love to say that a lot. But I think in this case it is. You are taking personal responsibility for yourself and other people around you when you socially distance, wash your hands, and put on a mask and wear a mask in a store. That is personal responsibility. Maybe instead of acting like a baby and throwing a fit because you have to put on a mask instead of a gas station, suck it up, be an adult, and actually just wear the goddamn mask. And that's it. It's not that hard. Do your responsibility as not only do your responsibility as an American and mask up and do what you have to do. The sooner you do that, the sooner we can all go to Applebee's. Because guess what? That would mean we actually work together as Americans to defeat this virus. Will that happen? Probably not. Being honest with you. But that said, you can't say that we didn't warn you when the death toll will continue to exponentially rise come this winter. Winter is coming. And it's going to bring a lot of death with it, unfortunately. Okay. Moving on here. This guy creeps me out. Just like every picture of him that I find, he looks like a serial killer. All right, this guy. And I don't generally go after people's looks, but this guy creeps me out. Like, he looks like he's from American Psycho. And as you're going to see, kind of acts like it too. All right. So let's move on. A volunteer who volunteered to be a member of Jared Kushner's task force on the coronavirus is blowing the whistle on alleged efforts to manipulate COVID data in order to help Trump politically. Now, that person is the grandson of former Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. And he told the New Yorker that he was the one who blew the whistle back in April on Kushner's Corona task force because of what he described as a stunning level of incompetence. Shocker. All right, so let's get into the details here. Max Kennedy Jr. had told the New Yorker's Jane Mayer that he had sent an anonymous whistleblower complaint to Congress back in April, detailing what he called dangerous incompetence in the administration's pandemic response, according to this report. So now, that was back in April. It is now nearly October, and we have seen over 200,000 deaths from coronavirus or coronavirus-related deaths, and over 7 million people that have been infected that we know of. Incompetence? Absolutely. But that's just part of it. All right, but there's more. He said, I am writing in this complaint, I'm writing to alert my representatives of these challenges and to ask that they do everything possible to help frontline healthcare workers and other Americans in need. So now, understandable, right? That he's saying, look, we've got some dangerous incompetence. We need help. We need help. This pandemic response under Kushner is terrible. Well, what made it so bad? Well, we'll get to that. But first, what was Kennedy doing there? Well, he was advised by a friend to volunteer for Kushner's impact team and decided to jump at the opportunity to join the supply chain task force in March, believing that the job was not political. So, look, Kennedy is somebody who now is, working for the Democrats, and I think it's important to point that out. But originally he was like, Kushner task force, yeah, look, I just want to help this pandemic because already things are getting fairly bad here in America, and this is still where we had fairly low deaths in this country, but nonetheless wanted to help to make sure people in this country, medical professionals specifically, had enough PPE to handle this. And so he did that. Now, Kennedy was surprised when he got there to find out that he was surrounded by about 20 other 20-something volunteers from various fields with no experience in procuring medical supplies. So, well, that's fine, right? I mean, that can't be the whole team. Or is it? Well, he told Meyer that instead of being the support staff for the procurement team, as he originally believed, he was told that they actually were the team. Quote, we were the entire frontline team for the federal government. Wow. Already, wow. Now, look, I appreciate that they were volunteering to help. but they had no idea what to do. None, because they've never done procurement before. Now, the team was tasked with procuring these much-needed medical supplies, N95 masks, gloves, face shields, other PPE that they use in medical settings. They were tasked to do that with their own laptops, so they brought their own personal computers in, and their own private email accounts, which were not government. Oh, great. I'm sure that went very well. Or at least maybe it would have went well had the government and the Trump administration itself not actively tried to sabotage it. Kennedy said that as the weeks went on, he was disturbed by President Trump's efforts to downplay the pandemic, which we know from the Bob Woodward tapes that Trump knew that this virus was dangerous. He knew that this was a problem. He knew that it was affecting not just older people, but young people as well. Called this incredibly devastating, but also said, I downplayed it because I didn't want to create a panic, while also creating panics about Democrats, about, quote unquote riots, and all that other stuff. But no panic on the pandemic at all. Right. Now, Kennedy, for his part, says, I knew from that room that he was saying things that just weren't true. Shocker. And added that the team was just too small to meet the challenge. Too small, too unprepared, not enough support. Is there any surprise that they failed at their job? As a result, they failed to get enough equipment, forcing hospital workers to reuse potentially contaminated equipment, which of course got a lot of medical professionals sick, or improvise with garbage bags, and we've seen all those pictures, while states bid against each other for those critical supplies. Supplies that Kushner, according to a recent Vanity Fair article, wanted the states to fight over. Kushner also blamed New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for not, quote, pounding the phones hard enough to get supplies. And said that, hey, it's not the government's job to do this, to get supplies for you, different states. No, that's your job, and the job of the free market. That's what he told a group of business leaders who had overheard this meeting. I mean, that's insane. But here's what he also said during that meeting that, of course, shocked the hell out of the business community, which were rallying to try to help. There were business leaders that wanted Kushner to invoke the Defense Production Act in order to create, to manufacture this PPE for them to use. Well, that didn't happen because Kushner wasn't he wasn't really interested in doing that. In fact, he said of New York, quote, his people are going to suffer, and that's their problem. As if New York wasn't part of America. But understand that this is at a time where this pandemic was hitting New York especially hard. It was hitting these larger blue states and cities really, really hard. And so the Trump administration basically said, that's fine. We don't really care. It's blue state. They're not going to vote for us in November anyway, so why should we help them? Why should we help them get supplies? No, that's their job. Go pound the phones. It gets worse. It gets worse. Kennedy also told Mayor that Brad Smith, one of the leaders of the task force, had pressured Kennedy to fudge the numbers by specifically creating a model that changes the projected number of fatalities from the virus. Smith told him that he wanted the model to revise down the number of projected deaths, arguing that the experts' models were, in his opinion, too severe. It's too much. Those numbers look terrible. No. Revise them down. Create your own model and pass it off. Really. Now, Kennedy said that he rejected doing that and said, I don't know the first thing about disease modeling. Amazing, right? So now you're going to ask this group of people that already are in over their head and don't know what they're doing to then fudge the numbers for the administration on the administration's behalf in order to make it not seem like it was so bad. Complete corruption. And look, again, things are really bad. 7 million affected, 200,000 people dead, and rising. And again, we're heading into winter. Winter is coming in a literal and figurative sense. It's not going to be a good situation. By December, some estimates have the death toll at about 3,000 people a day. That is a 9/11 every 24 hours. One more thing to note, too, that as I mentioned before, this was not supposed to be political in nature, this task force, right? Now, obviously, fudging the numbers was, but that wasn't the only situation here. Kennedy also told the outlet the team was directed to prioritize requests from Donald Trump's personal friends and supporters, including giving special attention to Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, who demanded masks for a hospital that she favored. Well, hey, at least she's demanding masks, while, of course, publicly on her show saying that masks are bad. And he recalled one task force official telling him that Donald Trump was, quote, a marketing genius because he personally came up with the strategy of blaming the states for the failure to procure equipment. When, of course, as I mentioned, it was really them. It was the fault of Kushner's task force. And they just shifted the blame. Not only unprepared was the task force, but they were deeply incompetent and 100% political. One senior official described the team to the New York Times as a, quote, frat party that descended from a UFO and invaded the federal government. Well, that is a very interesting way to put it. But, I mean, what else would you say? They're absolutely corrupt and don't care about American citizens. They don't care about lives. And with a team like that, what would you expect? But then again, it was never about lives or about serving the public. It was about helping themselves. GQ's Luke Darby wrote in May of Kushner, like Trump when it comes to fighting coronavirus, Kushner appears more concerned with the stock market than with public health. Yep. One Republican briefed on the administration's coronavirus response told Vanity Fair that as early as mid-January, advisors were sounding alarms about the coronavirus, but Jared kept saying that the stock market would go down and Trump, as a result, would not get reelected. And so, of course, they downplayed it because all they cared about is their own money. That was their only priority. And interestingly enough, to kind of hammer that point home, the only time that Republicans in Congress acted on coronavirus is when the stock market crashed. That was it. Oh my God. Their hair was on fire. We got to do something. We got to do. I know. The Democrats did the CARES Act, which is huge giveaways to corporations. Perfect. Let's send it. And then, of course, you had Mnuchin. You had the Fed, that was bailing out the banks. And now that the stock market is essentially stabilized, things are doing fairly well on Wall Street. Republicans don't really care to do a coronavirus relief bill. Look, the last one, the CARES Act, ran out at the end of July. It is nearly the end of September. And we still do not have a coronavirus relief bill. No, look, again, if you're a political hack, you'll blame the Democrats, right? Democrats had a bill since May. They had the HEROES Act. And they even tried to compromise with Republicans by cutting a lot of money out of that bill. Again, this is supposed to be a stimulus bill, right? It's supposed to stimulate the economy, help the states, help the post office, which, again, had their own plan to give everybody, every American family 5 masks, as well as, of course, handle voting, mail-in ballots specifically as a result of coronavirus. Donald Trump doesn't like mail-in ballots. He thinks they're fraudulent with no proof at all. So he shut that down, appointed Louis DeJoy to also dismantle the post office so that they can't do mail-in ballots. They did all of this stuff. to try to stop government from being effective in their response. And that is why we are literally the worst country when it comes to coronavirus. We have 4% of the country, of the nation's population, 25% of the world's coronavirus cases, and the highest death toll of the country, or of the world. So yes, we are doing terribly. But again, all they care about is their own money. It's greed. It's greed. Their own priority, keep the stocks up, keep making money, because they're all invested in the markets. And, of course, the secondary effect, win the election. And if they got to fudge the numbers or get people to do it, well, that's what they're going to do. Pence's aide was also, I believe, asked to fudge numbers and to say things that were not true. Kennedy also told Mayer that he had come forward, even though he signed an NDA, but he doubts that the administration can silence him in court. And he said, for the reason that he came forward, if you see something that might be illegal and cause thousands of civilian lives to be lost, person has to speak out. And added, I couldn't sleep. I was so distressed and disturbed by what I'd seen. Now, he also described the pandemic's response as, quote, like a family office meets organized crime melded with Lord of the Flies. It was a government of chaos. And that is especially not what you need during a pandemic. All I can say is, look, if Donald Trump wins, it's not going to get better, because it turns out if you elect chaos agents, don't be surprised if you have utter chaos. All right. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back. We've got a Trump rally. People respond to a Trump rally. And then we've got the Pentagon stealing relief money in order to give it to their defense contractor friends. So massive corruption. We'll be back with those two stories. Stay right here around the nation. Please like and share the stream too as well. All right. We'll see you in a minute. Be right back.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. Waldorf here with you. All right, so first, I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of patrons. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Please help us out so you can keep independent progressive media on the air. I want to thank Jason Lee, and I want to thank Angela. So that's our patrons of the day. Channel members, Al Capone, and, oh, I just got that. Al Capone. Oh, that's brilliant. And Aquarian Queen. So you just have to say it, I guess, for it to work. Well done, Al Capone. Well done. All right, Tango Bangle, by the way, in the super chat says, Republicans released their investigation of Hunter Biden, which is probably going to be garbage. So, fun times. All right, moving on. Let's get to something important. How you're getting screwed over. Awesome. There's a new bombshell report out from the Washington Post showing how COVID-19 relief money passed by the CARES Act that was meant for medical supplies was instead given to defense contractors for reasons that were not involved with medical supplies. So now This was the $1 billion fund that Congress gave Pentagon back in March as part of the CARES Act. So they gave that $1 billion in order to build up the country's medical supplies as we had a shortage of equipment, N95 masks and things like that. So now this medical equipment money, money that was meant for medical equipment, was mostly funneled, unfortunately, to defense contractors in order to make things like engine parts for jets, body armor, and dress uniforms. None of those things are medical supplies. None of those things. So now the CARES Act gave the Pentagon money to prevent, prepare, and respond to coronavirus. Now, do any of those things do anything to help do any of that for coronavirus? No. But as usual, there's a high level of corruption in our government. And so, look at that. They got all this money that went to corporations. And so let me give you the details. According to the Post, the $1 billion fund is just a fraction of the $3 trillion in emergency spending that Congress had approved earlier this year to deal with the pandemic. But that money, in some cases, was redirected to firms that were not originally targeted for assistance. For example, $183 million was afforded to firms, including Rolls-Royce and ArcelorMittal, to maintain the shipbuilding industry. Tens of millions of dollars for a satellite, drone, and space surveillance technology. $80 million to a Kansas aircraft parts business suffering from the Boeing 737 MAX grounding and the global slowdown in air travel, and $2 million for a domestic manufacturer of Army dress uniform fabric. More than a third of the awards were for less than $5 million and went to small firms for things that were not related to anything COVID-19. Now, the Department of Defense says, well, we had to spend that money because we had a shortfall of those things. But wait a minute. How do you have a shortfall when you received $686 billion in 2019 as part of your fiscal year? You realize the United States gives more money to the military than the next 6 countries in the world combined. What do you mean there's a shortfall? How the fuck do you have a shortfall when you get that much money? You get more money than pretty much any other part of the government going to quote unquote defense. Garbage. Look, here's the thing. That money does not go to the troops, right? E1s make an average of $19,000 a year. There are numerous stories of, on-duty troops that have to use food stamps at the commissary because they don't make enough money. Where's all that money going then? Wealthy defense contractors. It goes right into their pocket. And that's what happens. And so major defense contractors such as Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman had received this money despite being financially healthy during the pandemic, even though there is some pandemic-related disruption. They have also done so well that they have continued to pay stock dividends to investors. If you are a company that is struggling, you do not give dividends to investors. Do you know that tens of thousands of businesses have shut down for good? They're not coming back. These are small businesses. These are hearts of the community. And that's as a result of the administration not taking enough action to support them through the pandemic. They had the Paycheck Protection Act, right? But that was critically underfunded for all the businesses. And they were not prepared and properly funded enough to handle all the business closures. And yet, Lockheed Martin gets millions of dollars in funding that they don't need. And yes, oh yes, it gets worse. Some defense contractors received the Pentagon money even though they had already dipped into another pot of bailout funding, the aforementioned Paycheck Protection Program. So they're double dipping. Finally, the real kicker. As Congress debates whether to pass another stimulus package, the Pentagon and defense contractors have called for an additional $11 billion. If you're looking for the real welfare queens, I believe that we have found them. These companies who are profitable, paying dividends, and are doing generally pretty good and have double dipped in federal funding are now sticking their hands out and saying, give me more. I need more money. I need more money. This is all while 40 million people are out of work. You have a rent apocalypse. People that are being evicted in record numbers. You have private companies calling themselves the Uber of evictions, going around and helping landlords evict people for not being able to pay their rent. Are you serious? Are you serious? And look, you have unemployment benefits that ran out July 31st. And you have some states, yes, that are still doing unemployment, expanded unemployment benefits, but at a much, much reduced level, $300. And there are some people that did not get a $1,200 check, but thank God Northrop Grumman can pay their goddamn investors. It's the corruption. It's the corruption. And it's right in your face. These guys are laughing at us all the way to the bank, which, by the way, also got bailed out in the trillions of dollars by the Fed. That's your money, by the way. Your money. Your tax money that didn't go to you when you needed it. It went to these corporations. It went to Northrop Grumman, right? It went to General Electric. It went to all these giant corporations and didn't help you at all. And now, defense industry groups are saying that the DoD awards are, quote, crucial. And they point to companies that sell aircraft parts for both military and commercial jets who have been financially impacted by COVID-19. Look, that part is true. Had the airlines been just devastated by this? Yeah, they have. Is it our job to continue bailing them out? No, it's not. Look, we already give the Pentagon billions of dollars a year, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Why can't they dip into that? Why can't they use that at all? I understand that you can't lose your supply chains, but they already have so much money. And again, I want to point out that this money is not being used to help the survival of a lot of these companies, but it goes to companies that are well off, like GE Aviation, a subsidiary of General Electric, which received 2 awards worth $75 million alone in June. And Rolls-Royce, a subsidiary, received $22 million to upgrade their Mississippi plant. Did they really need that money? Absolutely not. And again, this is supposed to be for making masks, gloves, ventilators, and other equipment, PPE. This was not meant to make personal upgrades to your plant to help your bottom line. Look, this is what happens. This is what happens when the government is captured by special interests. This is what happens when your government is corrupt. We have to be the most corrupt country on the planet. It's insane. It's right in your face. I mean, this is why we have to get the money out. Okay, politicians allow this corruption to happen. They allowed this to happen because they benefit from this corruption. And now, as a result of this, a couple of Democrats have decided to launch an inquiry, an investigation into this. I wonder what's going to happen. We have these companies. We also had the banks, right, that have been caught money laundering for terrorist groups. We also had the Panama Papers. What came of all of those things? Absolutely nothing. Nothing happened. Why? Because we are a corrupt country. 100%. And so what are we supposed to do? Us regular citizens that are caught up in this web of corruption, right? Well, we got to fight back. How do we do that? We elect uncorrupted politicians. They don't take corporate money, right? And we got to fight to get the money out. Now that involves going to the streets. It involves going to the polls. It involves, going to basically doing everything, every kind of, citizen action that we can to try to get people to not take corporate money and to eliminate that corporate money from our political system. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a very, very long, very difficult fight. But could you imagine the result? Even if we don't see it in our lifetime. Even if we fight for years, decades to get the money out of politics, could you imagine a world where your representatives actually represent you and actually fight for you instead of letting all this money go to these fantastically rich corporations. It can become a reality one day, but only if we were willing to put in the time and the effort to fight. I'm willing. Are you? All right. Let's move on. One more story for you guys. And it's just fun, ridiculous. So we'll have a little fun, leave off on a decent note, I guess, even though the subject matter is pretty terrible. All right. Maybe it's not so fun. So the United States just passed officially the $200,000. Let me start that again. The United States just officially passed the 200,000 deaths from COVID-19 threshold, and Donald Trump marked the occasion by holding a super spreader rally in Pennsylvania. So now, there's a picture going around on social media. Let me show you that. That's the crowd. Boy, they really don't look like they were socially distancing there. And look, I know it's pretty hard to see, but I've seen other pictures, other video, which suggests that most of the crowd was not actually wearing any masks. So on Twitter, Donald Trump bragged about this crowd size, as he usually does. He said, "Our great rally tonight in Pennsylvania. Tremendous energy." People online, however, were a little less impressed, with one person saying, "A no masking, no distancing COVID-19 super spreading gathering of brainwashed cultists and the sociopath in chief who plays them for dang fools." It's a good one. Heyman Menta online said, "You called off your wedding. You couldn't attend a loved one's funeral. You couldn't go to prom or attend your own graduation. These people don't care and continue making everything worse." So now that really kind of struck me, that comment, because it makes you think, what did you give up to try to help slow the spread? I mean, what did you miss? Personally, I missed lots of family gatherings, golfing with my dad, because he's a cancer survivor. I missed, visiting my mom in person. She's got bad kidneys. Going out on dates with my wife because, God forbid, we get sick or I get sick, spread it to her, and she's got to quarantine for 14 days because she works in the medical field. Or if I have to go to hospital because I don't have insurance. And yet, these people, they're living it up without a care in the world at this rally. We did all the sacrifice. We did all the heavy lifting. We gave things up to save lives, and they don't give a shit. Look, the death toll is pretty bad in this country, 200,000. It could be worse. However, thanks to those of us who actually did the right thing, and it's not as bad as it could have been, but it's still bad because of the inaction at the top. Notice, again, no masks. Donald Trump saying, I don't, some people say that masks are not good. So, I'm not going to encourage people to wear masks. And he doesn't wear one at his rallies. Every once in a while, there's a picture that pops up of him wearing a mask, and sometimes doesn't. Testing, same thing, right? I don't encourage testing because that makes me look bad when there are higher numbers. Doesn't mean that there's less cases of COVID. It just means that we know less about them. I mean, it's disgusting. Now, one person online said, "Notice no masks on the floor, but they passed them out to everyone behind near him. Just like everyone around Trump is tested. If massive slavery and tests are not useful, why bother testing reporters before every presser? Because his safety matters. Yours doesn't." That's another good point. Another person says, "Well, give it 2 weeks. There will be a lot of your supporters that are dying. They won't have any energy then. You're not worth it." Understand, though, I tend to know Trump supporters fairly well, I believe. And these people will crawl their way to the polls, dying, to vote for a man who wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. And that's the amazing thing about it. And you know what? That makes me think about Bernie Sanders, right? So why do I think about Bernie Sanders? It's a weird thought. No, Bernie Sanders literally stopped a rally in order to help a woman who fainted. Saved a woman from getting hit by a car in D.C. Or stopped people from mobbing Andrea Mitchell. And look, I think Obama also did something similar for, helping a woman who had fainted. It kind of makes me think that, look, these Democratic politicians, is how many problems do I have with Democrats? But at the end of the day, they at least pretend to have some sort of human empathy for people. And so they would actually try to save someone whose life is, somebody fainting in a rally or somebody having some sort of problem. Okay? Bernie Sanders stopping a man from killing himself. These people actually care. Do you get that vibe from Donald Trump? No, I would not. Now, it just makes me think that we could actually have a president right now that has empathy. But instead, we have an asshole, and we might have the asshole for another 4 years. It's amazing. Disastrous. Another person points out, this is Devin Nunes's alt mom, which is always fun. The Trump campaign has evidently made the calculation that these rallies will turn out more voters than they kill. Well, look, to be fair, that's just less money for them to spend, on Medicare or Social Security, and that means more they can shove in their pockets. It's a win-win. It's a win-win for them. And finally, one last one here. Jim Gibson says, wish someone would ask the president why he does not shake hands and interact with the folks who attend his rallies. If he is holding rallies, go down to the crowd and interact. Well, we already know why he doesn't. According to an ex-Pence aide, Donald Trump says that COVID might be a good thing. He had said this before. Why would he think that COVID's a good thing, especially if it could hurt his polling? Well, again, this was said back in, I believe, February, so very, very early on before it really had an impact here. But he said, maybe it's a good thing because then I don't have to go and shake your disgusting hands. And by you, he means, well, you're a MAGA supporter. He means you. Not have to shake your disgusting hand. Look, everyone in that crowd, understand that all those people are disgusting to him. I mean, they're useful, yes, but also they're the rabble. The average person. Ooh. Sometimes those people are poor and dirty, filled with germs and COVID. Ugh. Disgusting. I don't have to shake their hand. I'm glad. Look, he's fine doing those rallies because he's protected. He's up in the podium. He's fine. He's not close. He's not packed in with others like sardines. Again, take a look, right? No masks, packed right in there. What do you think is going to happen? It's a super spreader event. Absolutely. But understand why I bring that up, because that's what he thinks about you. That's what you are to him. You're disposable. As long as you vote for him and support him and send him money and cover for his lies and his bullshit, he's got a use for you. You're a mark, a useful idiot. And if you die, though, after doing that stuff, well, that's okay to him. It was your time. Even though, of course, according to him, he'll tell you that virtually no one has died as a result of COVID. You're virtually nobody. If you're one of the 200,000 people that died, or if you had a family member or friend, grandparent, sister, aunt, uncle, anyone, anybody that died, well, understand that what he's saying is they're virtual nobodies to him. And he'd be right, because he thinks of you as a nobody. You don't matter at all unless it goes to help him. That's what he thinks of you. Because that's who Donald Trump is. The sooner you see it, maybe the sooner you break away. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Please follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitch. Follow me on Twitter at Jeff's Politics for more hot takes and shit posts. All that stuff. Like our videos. Share them around if you think that they're important, if you think that they're going to change people's minds, or if you want people to know. Please do so. Help us out. Become a patron or become a channel member. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Please clap.
Tolerate.
There's some whores in this house. Wet ass P-word.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man.
Mike Pounds.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.